Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us in the revised stream. So we'll be looking at Anguttara Nikaya 4.113 this morning with Bhante Suddhaso. So as usual, if you have questions at any time, feel free to type them into the live chat, and Bhante will address them at the end of the talk. So good morning so far to Jens, Gita, Eleanor, all very fast in joining the new stream. And hopefully our new friends or other friends will trickle in as well. So at this time, I'll pass things over to Bhante Suddhaso for Sutta study.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassam. Good morning, friends. So as mentioned, today we'll be looking at the Patoda Sutta, translated here as the Whip, from Anguttara Nikaya, Book of the Fours, Sutta number 113. As usual, I'll read through the sutta and give some explanations at certain points. Then at the end, I'll answer whatever questions you have. So please feel free to enter questions and comments at any time, and we'll go through those at the end. So the sutta begins. The Buddha says, "Monks, there are 4 kinds of high-quality horses found in the world. What 4? Here, monks, this is one kind of high-quality horse. It is roused when it sees the shadow of the whip, thinking, 'What will the horse trainer make me do today? How should I react?' Monks, this is how it is for this kind of high-quality horse. Monks, this is the first kind of high-quality horse found in the world." So the Buddha is introducing here a simile of horse training. And there's many suttas where the Buddha uses horses and horse training as a setup for analogizing how he trains people, how people can be trained in the Dhamma Vinaya, in Buddhist practice. And if you find this offensive, well, look at your arrogance, look at your conceit, and ask yourself why you think you're so different from a horse, why you think you're so different from an animal. So the truth is that realistically, unenlightened beings, for the most part, are acting blindly on our habits and impulses and instincts. So not particularly different from most animals. So humans might be a little bit better at logical thought. Some humans, anyway, might be a little bit better at logical thought than the average animal. But we're still, for the most part, very strongly driven by our impulses and instincts. So much of what the Buddha speaks about in terms of training in Buddhist practice is similar to how one trains an animal or tames an animal. So we apply that same effort to taming and training our own mind. Because even when the outermost layer of our mind seems to be this logical, rational, clearly thinking, sentient being, when you get just a little bit below the surface, what we find is this chaotic mess of uncontrolled emotions, of runaway desires, of overpowering urges, of strongly rooted habits, tendencies to react in particular ways, filtration processes which distort, alter, and rewrite our conscious experience. And all of that is pretty much entirely outside the reach of logic. It's entirely outside the reach of thought. It's something which needs to be trained, just as you train an animal. It's something which requires the same persistence, wordless forcefulness and persistence that one uses in training a dog or a cat or a horse, in the example used in the sutta. So here the Buddha is giving a set of 4 examples. So I'll go ahead and read through all 4 examples and then talk a little bit more about what the Buddha is trying to present here. So again, the first one is the kind of horse that just when it sees the shadow of the whip. So the horse trainer is swinging its whip at the horse, and the horse just sees the shadow of the whip, and already it's ready to respond. Already the horse is like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this. What am I supposed to do now? So this is a very smart horse. This is the kind of horse where it doesn't need to be struck. It just needs to get the hint that the whip is on its way. And it's already willing and eager to do whatever instructions it's given. The second example the Buddha gives, he says, monks, this is another kind of high quality horse. It is not roused when it sees the shadow of the whip, but it is roused when it feels the whip strike its hair, thinking, what will the horse trainer make me do today? How should I react? Monks, this is how it is for this kind of high quality horse. Monks, this is the second kind of high quality horse found in the world. So the second example is the horse where it's not enough for it to just see the shadow of the whip, but when it feels the whip strike its hair. So this is where it's a relatively light touch. So if it just feels it against its body hair, that tickling sensation, then the horse thinks, okay, what am I supposed to do? How can I act in accordance with the horse trainer's instructions? What's the proper way for me to respond to this? So this horse is a little bit slower than the first one, maybe a little more conceited, a little more self-willed, a little more stubborn, but it's still pretty quick to get on the game and do what it's supposed to do. Then the third example, the Buddha says, monks, this is another kind of high quality horse. It is not roused when it sees the shadow of the whip or when it feels the whip strike its hair, but it is roused when it feels the whip pierce its skin, thinking, what will the horse trainer make me do today? How should I react? Monks, this is how it is for this kind of high quality horse. Monks, this is the third kind of high quality horse found in the world. So the third case is one where it's not enough for the horse to see the shadow of the whip. It's not enough for them to get struck lightly with the whip, but the horse has to be struck hard enough that the tip of the whip pierces its skin. Maybe pierces it enough to draw blood. So this is a horse where it needs a pretty strong message. It's not getting the subtle messages. It's not getting the gentle messages. It needs a strong message. But once it gets that strong message, then it's ready to do what the horse trainer wants it to do. So a whip, even if the tip of the whip is not sharp, because of how fast the tip of the whip is moving, when it strikes skin, it can cut the skin. It can draw blood. And of course, it's very painful. So that's also what the Buddha is pointing to here with this third kind of horse. This is the kind of horse where it has to personally feel some pain before it gets the hint, before it gets the message. So the first kind of horse is the most clever. It doesn't actually need to feel anything. It just needs to see the intimation that something might happen to it. The second kind of horse, it has to be a little more blatant. It has to actually feel the whip touch its skin. It has to feel the whip touch its hair. So again, the sense like, well, I'm not getting hurt yet, but it's close. The third kind of horse where the whip has to actually pierce the skin. So the horse has to be personally injured, hurt personally in its body before it gets a sense of urgency, a sense of the importance of responding appropriately. Then the fourth kind, the Buddha says, monks, this is another kind of high quality horse. It is not roused when it sees the shadow of the whip, or when it feels the whip strike its hair, or when it feels the whip pierce its skin. But it is roused when it feels the whip pierce through to its bones. Thinking, what will the horse trainer make me do today? How should I react? Monks, this is how it is for this kind of high quality horse. Monks, this is the fourth kind of high quality horse found in the world. So the fourth kind, this is a horse which it's not getting the message. It's really not understanding the importance of following the instructions that are given. There's no sense of urgency. There's no sense of significance to what's going on. Even when it's struck hard to the point of piercing its skin, drawing blood, feeling pain, even then it's just like, no, I'm not interested. I'm not gonna follow your orders. I'm not going to get in line with the training that you're giving me. I'm gonna do whatever I want because I'm me and I can do whatever I want and I don't care about your instructions. But the horse trainer keeps striking and strikes harder and strikes through the skin, piercing through the muscles, the tendons, till the horse feels it in its bones, till the strike of the whip can be felt all the way through to its bones. Then finally, when it's striking at the core of the horse's body, finally it gets the message. It finally understands the urgency of the situation. And then it starts to respond to the horse trainer's instructions. So these are the four kinds of horses, again, ranked by how quickly the horse understands the message, based upon how much personal force is needed before the horse gets the message. And I should say a little bit about the Pali that's used here. What's being translated here as roused in Pali, the word is samvega. So those who are familiar with Buddhist technical terms may have come across this word samvega. And samvega is a word which is very difficult to translate into a single English word. It's one of those words where you kind of need a whole paragraph to translate it. So samvega is sometimes translated as a sense of urgency, which is kind of accurate, kind of. It's sometimes translated, actually one of the older translations, which I still quite like, even though it's also not terribly accurate, is religious emotion, which is vague enough to mean almost anything. So often, again, it's better to give a whole paragraph of explanation. So the term samvega is most commonly used for a situation where a person gets some understanding of the dangers of samsara and the importance of practicing the path that leads to awakening. So when one gets that sense, then one has samvega arising. Another circumstance under which samvega arises is when one has some experience which gives one a powerful sense of faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. That also can be a circumstance where one is said to have samvega arising. Or when one gets a clear sense of the path to awakening, a clear sense that enlightenment is possible, that awakening is achievable in this life. Then again, at that time, one can say that samvega has arisen. Again, a sense of urgency is correct, but it has to be understood that this is almost always used within the context of an understanding of the dangers of samsara and the possibility of awakening and the importance of following the path to awakening, of engaging in the path to awakening. So here the Buddha is applying the word Samvega to training a horse. And that's because he's using this simile as a way of introducing how we train practitioners, how Buddhist practitioners can be trained on the path. So then the Buddha, in the next section, he brings it into the context of Buddhist training. He says, in the same way, monks, there are 4 kinds of high-quality people found in the world. What for? Here, amongst, this is one kind of high-quality person. They hear, in that village or town, a woman or man is in pain or has died. And because of that, they are roused. Roused, they strive prudently. Self-striving, they personally realize the highest truth, wisely piercing through to it and seeing it. Monks, this kind of high-quality person is just like the high-quality horse that is roused when it sees the shadow of the whip. Monks, this is how it is for this kind of high-quality person. Monks, this is the first kind of high-quality person found in the world. So this first kind of person, again, it's not particularly personal. You just hear, oh, in some other town or some other village, somebody has died or is in serious pain or has a serious illness of some sort. So it might not even be somebody you know particularly well, maybe not even somebody you know at all. Maybe it's a friend of a friend. Maybe somebody tells you, oh, my friend who lives over in San Diego is on their deathbed. They got the coronavirus, they couldn't treat it, and the person's dying. And when you hear that news, then you reflect, oh, I am of the same nature. I also am of the nature to decay, the nature to get sick, the nature to die. I am not exempt from that fate. And what am I doing with my mind? How's my practice going? Have I yet made a place of safety within my own mind? Have I yet established the necessary wisdom so that I know I'm on the course that leads towards awakening? Have I yet made sufficient progress that if I get sick and start to die, have I made enough progress that I can be certain that I won't backslide in future lives? Have I made enough progress in my practice so that I can die peacefully, with a clear conscience, with a sharp mind? Have I made enough progress in my practice so that I know that my practice will continue progressing towards awakening in future lives? So then reflecting on oneself, one realizes, no, I haven't. There's still more to be done. And it's important for me to get on this task right away because I don't know when it's going to be my head on the chopping block. Right now, it's somebody else who I barely know or maybe don't even personally know at all. Right now, they're the ones who are dying or dead. But next up might be me. So I need to get on my game. I need to stop wasting time. So this is, again, it's like a horse that sees the shadow of the whip. It doesn't actually have to be touched by the whip, but just being reminded that the whip exists, the horse springs into action. So in the same case, just hearing that somebody is severely ill or has died is enough to remind us that we shouldn't waste time. We need to make the most of this precious human life. And then one strives prudently, so one makes a sincere effort in one's practice. So striving prudently in Pali is yoniso parahati. So yoniso is translated here as prudently. Yoniso literally means based on the origin. So yoni in Pali, yoni literally means womb. But it has a broader abstract meaning of the source of things, the origin of things, the basis of things. So yoniso means having a clear understanding of the basis, of the underlying causes and conditions, of the root circumstances which contribute to something happening or coming into being. So yoniso is often translated simply as wisely, but it needs to understood that it has this deeper meaning of understanding the circumstantial causes and conditions for something. So it's a deep understanding of the causal nature of something. So that it's a bit more precise of a meaning than simply to say wisely. And most commonly, where we encounter the word yoniso is in the phrase yoniso manasikara, which is commonly translated as wise attention or careful consideration, which again is kind of missing the depth of this word yoniso. So yoniso means paying attention to the origin of things, the sources of things, the fundamental causes and conditions behind things. And parahati means to strive, to make effort, to resolve oneself on something. And then through resolving oneself upon this course of action, this course of Buddhist practice, then one can realize the highest truth. So in Pali, that's parama sacca, the paramount truth, which is also sometimes used to mean absolute truth. So parama sacca, the highest truth or absolute truth. Then, and it says, having pierced through it and seeing it with wisdom. So this is one reason why on this occasion I chose to translate yoniso as prudently instead of as wisely. Is because later in the same sentence we see panyaya, so with panya, with wisdom. So it's important to distinguish between two words in this way. So clearly seeing the highest truth with wisdom. So this is a way of saying attaining enlightenment, attaining awakening. So the second kind of person, the Buddha says, monks, this is another kind of high quality person. It is not when they hear in that village or town a woman or man is in pain or has died, but rather when they themselves see a woman or man who is in pain or has died, that they are roused. Roused, they strive prudently. Self-striving, they personally realize the highest truth, wisely piercing through to it and seeing it. Monks, this kind of high-quality person is just like the high-quality horse that is roused when it feels the whip strike its hair. So this is the case of somebody who they need a little more personal of a message. It's not enough just to hear that, oh, somebody somewhere is sick or dying or dead. They need to see it for themselves. So maybe you visit a hospital or you go to a cemetery or maybe you see somebody on the streets. But there's some reminder to you of the inevitability of decay, sickness, and death. You personally see somebody decaying, sickening, or dying. And again, there's that recognition. I could be next. It's not just other people who get old, decay, get sick, and die. It's also me. And if I keep wasting time, well, when death comes, are we going to be ready for it? Or are we going to die confused? Are we going to have a clear understanding of reality such that we won't be disturbed and agitated when we see the body failing? So again, this is like the horse that responds when it feels the whip strike its hair. So that's the still relatively gentle, but more personal message. When the horse trainer swings the whip and the horse doesn't get it, the horse trainer is like, okay, this horse needs a little sharper of a message. So it strikes the hair and the horse is like, okay, I'm ready. So we hear, oh, people are dying, and we're like, whatever, people die all the time, who cares? But then you actually see somebody dying, and you're like, whoa, this is real. This isn't a joke. This is not something that I can brush aside. It's a reality that I need to face. Then the third kind of person, the Buddha says, monks, this is another kind of high quality person. It is not when they hear in that village or town a woman or man is in pain or has died, or when they themselves see a woman or man who is in pain or has died, but rather when a relative is in pain or has died, that they are roused. Roused, they strive prudently. Self-striving, they personally realize the highest truth, wisely piercing through to it and seeing it. Monks, this kind of high-quality person is just like the high-quality horse that is roused when it feels the whip pierce its skin. So again, this is the case of the horse which doesn't get the gentle message. It's only when it actually feels that pain in its own body. It's only when it feels that piercing sting in its own body that it finally gets a sense of, okay, something's happening and I need to pay attention and I need to respond in the proper way. So again, it's a lot more personal when it's one of our own relatives. One of our own relatives is seriously ill or dying or dead. Then we're like, oh, something's going on here. This is starting to get a little too close to home. So during monk chat last week, somebody had asked, was there any particular incident that spurred you to enter monastic life? And the other monks answered that question, but then I was skipped, which was fine. I don't mind. But this is the perfect lead into me answering that question. So 4 months before I moved to the monastery, my father died. And I suspect that that was one of the major reasons why I decided it was time to stop putting it off. I'd been thinking about becoming a monk for a couple of years by that point. But I was putting it off and doing other things and playing around with this and that. But my father was sick and getting sicker and getting sicker and getting sicker, and then he died. And it was like, what am I doing with my time? Am I using my time well? Am I really doing what I want to be doing with my life? And the answer was no. No. I knew I wanted to be a monk, but I was wasting time. I was not committing myself. So in my case, when a relative died, then I was roused. And I knew it was time. It was time to stop wasting time and to get to the monastery. So again, this is someone, so apparently I'm the third kind of horse, the one that's a little bit dumb. And the horse trainer has to be like, come on, get going. And I'm like, ouch, okay, I get the message. So apparently I'm the moderately dumb horse. I'm at least not the extremely dumb horse. I'm the moderately dumb horse. Moderately stupid horse. That could be my subtitle. Bhante Suddhaso, moderately stupid horse. So again, some of us, we need a little bit sharper and harsher of a message before it really starts to sink in. Before it really starts to sink in that samsara is no joke. It's no game. Samsara is messy, painful, confusing. And if we're not careful, then we're just going to get swept away again and again and again, as we have been countless times. And right now, we have our hand on a lifeline, which is the Dhamma. And if we put forth the effort, we can pull ourselves up out of the mess. But if we don't make the effort, then any moment we can be swept away. So then the fourth kind of person, the Buddha says, monks, this is another kind of high quality person. It is not when they hear in that village or town a woman or man is in pain or has died, or when they themselves see a woman or man who is in pain or has died, or when a relative is in pain or has died, but rather when they themselves are afflicted with physical sensations that are painful, sharp, rough, bitter, unpleasant, disagreeable, and life-threatening, that they are roused. Roused, they strive prudently. Self-striving, they personally realize the highest truth, wisely piercing through to it and seeing it. Monks, this kind of high-quality person is just like the high-quality horse that is roused when it feels the whip pierce through to its bones. So this final kind of person, first off, I think it's interesting that the Buddha still refers to this as a high-quality horse and a high-quality person. So even though they're very slow to get the hint, and it's only under the most extreme circumstances that they finally start practicing, at least they start practicing. At least they start eventually. In another sutta where the Buddha uses the simile of horse training, he talks about the horse which gets the gentle message and the horse which gets the harsh message. But then he says there's some horses where no matter what you do, they just will not get the message. No matter how hard you try, they cannot be trained. And a horse like that is useless. It's not good for anything. So in this case, so the horse which only gets the message when the whip pierces through to its bones, at least it got the message eventually. Only under the most painful and injurious of circumstances, but still it got the message. So it can still be considered a high-quality horse, and in this simile, a high-quality person. So in this case, it's a person who only when they realize the frailty of their own body, only when they feel their own body getting old, decaying, getting sick, only when they recognize that their own body is progressing towards death, their own body is losing its strength, its vitality, its health. Only then do they finally understand this is serious. This samsara is serious. And I should not waste time. I should make the most of the time that I have. But this is a little bit dangerous at this point because it's difficult to practice when you're sick. It's difficult to practice when you're in pain. It's difficult to practice when you're dying. It's much easier to practice when you're healthy. So it's not good to wait until the last moment. There's a few places in the suttas where very old people come to see the Buddha. People even as old as 120 come to see the Buddha and ask for instructions. And when I read those suttas, I'm always just kind of like, wow, you waited a long time. 120 years old? Still not getting the message? But again, at least they're finally recognizing that there's something which needs to be done. But by that point, it's getting pretty late. 120 years old, you probably don't have a lot of time left. But also the time that you have, your body is extremely frail. It's extremely weak. Your health is very poor. Your mental faculties might be declining. It's not so good. In many places in the suttas, the Buddha says it's best to start practicing when you're still young, when you're young and healthy, when your mind is sharp and clear, not to wait until you're old and sick and frail. Definitely not to wait until your deathbed. But again, better late than never. Better to practice under suboptimal conditions than not to practice at all. So even this kind of person, the person who only really gets the importance of practice when they themselves are experiencing severe illness, even this kind of person is respectable because at least they're making the effort. So again, this is given as 4 kinds of people. And of course, the best kind of person is the one who, even when they just hear about other people sick or in pain or dying, then they're reminded of the importance of of Buddhist practice. They're reminded of the value of the Dhamma, and they practice sincerely. So let's try to be like the best person, the best kind of horse, the one which only needs to see the shadow of the whip, which only needs to hear about the danger of samsara, and they're already eager to practice, enthusiastic about practicing the Dhamma. So I think that's all I have to say about this sutta this morning. So at this time, if there's any questions or comments, we can go ahead and switch over to questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante, for sharing. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And welcome as well to some more friends joining in, including Galaxy, Michael, Alec, Liz, Unknown, Edward, Laura, and Shadow of Label. So there's a couple comments and questions so far. And if anybody else has questions, feel free to type them in at this time. So Eleanor asks, sometimes I don't see an urge is there until I've already engaged in it. Is there a way to help see and not give into an urge when one's mind is not as tamed as an experienced meditator's?
Yeah. Develop mindfulness. And we talk about mindfulness all the time to the point where it starts to become an empty buzzword. But mindfulness is not an empty buzzword. Mindfulness is an extremely important quality of continual awareness, continual self-awareness. So what I would encourage you then is to start looking at how you spend your time and to ask yourself, what am I doing that's weakening my mindfulness? So one of the first things which needs to go out the window is music. If you're still listening to music, stop. Basically, if you want to sabotage and destroy your Buddhist practice, listen to music. If you want to die confused without making one step closer to enlightenment, listen to music. It's one of the worst things you can do with your time as a Buddhist practitioner. Also, same with watching shows, actually. Watching shows is relatively destructive. Not quite to the degree of music, in my opinion, but it's pretty harmful. Every single moment, practice mindfulness of the body, constantly bringing attention back into your body, all the time. Mindfulness of the body is the foundation for mindfulness of mind. So keep bringing attention into your body at all times. And of course, meditate every day. So really working on developing sharp, clear awareness of body and mind through meditation practice every day. And watch what you do with your mind all the time as you go throughout your day. Every time you catch yourself lost in thought or thinking about silly things or inconsequential things, such as the silly things in that TV show that you were watching, or that Netflix binge from last week, or the music that you've been putting in your ears for the last 6 hours, like whatever it is, just notice, oh, I'm wasting my time thinking about silly things. It's time to stop right now. So really work on cultivating your practice in this way. Remember that Buddhist practice is not just meditation practice, but rather it's what we do every moment. So really closely examine what is weakening your mindfulness, what is obstructing your self-awareness, such that you aren't noticing these impulses and instincts, such that you aren't catching these urges, and start changing your life so that it's not such a problem anymore. Okay? Next.
Thank you. And Gita says, thank you. Thank you, Aya and Bantes. Gita also says, me too, it was after my father passed away that has now been over 20 years that we purchased the 3 baskets and started our journey. Since then, it's been an unshakable faith in the Triple Gem.
Great. And you can become a bhikkhuni. Since I'm assuming you did not become a bhikkhuni 20 years ago. It's never too late.
Mm-hmm. And Shadow of Label makes an interesting comment. 120 years old is Hayflick's limit, where cells can't divide anymore, in reference to the 120-year-old that went to see the Buddha. Or
I have no idea what you're talking about, but that's okay. I think the oldest recorded human was like 123 or something. There's some unconfirmed records of people older than that, but I think the oldest confirmed was 123. That sound right?
Yeah. I remember. I think it was from that island near Italy, actually.
Oh,
I forget what it's called. Anyway. And Eleanor also says, sorry to hear about your dad's passing away. I hope this question isn't inappropriate, but don't you sometimes wonder what your dad got reincarnated in? I have a difficult time believing in reincarnation.
Well, that's fine because I don't believe in reincarnation either, but I do believe in rebirth. So there's a subtle distinction there, which is that reincarnation inherently implies the existence of a soul that periodically re-enters a body. Whereas rebirth or continued existence is rather referring to the ongoing process of causes producing effects. So there's a subtle distinction there. And that the Buddhist concept of rebirth automatically excludes the idea of a soul, of a persistent being. On rare occasion, I think about where my father might have wound up, but I don't really bother to speculate. Rather, I just think wherever he is, may he be happy, may he be healthy, may he make progress towards awakening. That's it. And that's enough. If you have deceased relatives, which realistically everybody has deceased relatives by definition, then wish for your deceased relatives in the same way, to be happy, healthy, and to make progress towards awakening.
And Alex says, could you elaborate on the destructiveness of music? Music cannot be listened to mindfully? What about producing music?
Oh, you can do lots of things mindfully. You can kill people mindfully, for example, but it's not going to help you attain enlightenment. In fact, it's going to establish destructive conditions which will inhibit the path towards awakening. So that's the real problem with music, is that it agitates the mind, it stirs the mind, it contributes to distraction, confusion, daydreaming, spaciness, weakens samadhi, because the mind tends to be constantly rolling around the music that you've been putting in. It's addictive, which is one reason why the mind keeps returning to it over and over and over again. Again, one of the most common things that people complain about, and by people I mean ordinary lay people who aren't yet serious about their practice, they complain that it's hard to meditate because they have songs playing in their head. It's like, well, do you know why that is? It's because you listen to music. If you stop listening to music, then eventually those echoes in your mind will fade away. I never have music in my head when I meditate, because I never listen to music. It's very simple. The echoes in your mind are echoes of what you put in there. You stop putting in noise, then the noise fades away. Okay? Another thing I should point out about music, by the way, is music also tends to carry strong emotional charge. So when we listen to music, then we also have a tendency to fuel our own emotional impulses and habits, which then makes our emotions even more out of control than before. That's also not particularly helpful. Okay?
And the production or creation of music?
Well, I'm not involved in the production or creation of music personally. If you're really into music, well, I recommend getting into Chinese Buddhism, because their chanting is a lot more fun than most Theravada chanting. And it's a little more like music. It's not quite music still, but it's a little more musical than Theravada chanting. But it's musical in a way which is meant to contribute to samadhi. So it's set, precise, repeated patterns, which are designed to constantly loop your mind back to help you establish samadhi. So it's not like listening to pop music or something. It's a completely different experience.
And that dovetails well into Michael's comment, which is, I often find chanting the suttas as wonderfully musical, especially in the Chinese tradition. The music attaches to the message, or so it seems.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And Unknown says, I find watching the news on TV is also a distraction for the practice as we see more bad news than good.
Yeah, not particularly helpful. I think it's if you want to keep up on news, that's fine. To spend a few minutes a day. But yeah, similarly, I think it's better to read things online than it is to watch it on TV. It's less disturbing to the mind. It's less impactful. Okay, anything else?
And Liz asks, does inaction incur karma? In other words, if one knows that they're not committing themselves fully to practice, fully knowing that they should, is that person incurring bad karma?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, willful negligence, willful inaction is karma because you're making a choice, the choice to do nothing. So you're still creating karma because you're still making a choice. Okay.
And Vishy asks, could you please say something on frugal eating in mindfulness?
Well, so what the Buddha speaks about in Pali, it's bojjhane mattanyo, which literally means knowing the right amount when eating. So that means not too much and not too little, but eating the right amount. And that varies from person to person. So you need to be aware of your body, aware of what your body needs. So not starving yourself, but also not stuffing yourself. And also, the Buddha says that we should use food for the health of the body, the nourishment of the body. So we also need to reflect on what foods will support our physical health. So trying to eat healthy food rather than eating mm, junk food or chemically spiked food. Um, and contributing to mindfulness, well, one thing is that if you're eating toxic food, uh, or if you eat too much, then both of those things contribute to mental sluggishness. Um, Toxic food also contributes to unpleasant body sensations and poor overall health, which also can be obstructive to one's practice. Um, but also the flip side, if you're not eating enough, then that also can create difficulties and problems with your practice. And again, if we're too obsessive with food, like craving pleasant things or getting irritated about needing to eat in the first place or hating this or wanting that, all of that also stirs up and agitates and disturbs the mind. All of that also fuels our defilements, which lead away from serenity, which lead away from awakening. Okay.
And Eleanor says, I tend to get mad at my father in the middle of conversations, so it's tough to practice mindfulness while talking. I don't watch TV though, but music I do because I used to be a ballerina. Ballerina emoji.
Yeah, there's some people, and often it's family members, uh, but there's some people who, for some reason, when we're communicating with them, our emotions run hot and strong. And it's very hard to control our speech, to control our mind. So when you're going into circumstances like that, if you know you're about to interact with someone like that, then make an extra effort beforehand to establish serenity of mind, to establish self-control, to establish loving kindness in the mind. Um, it might also be worth minimizing those kinds of interactions, or intentionally steering those interactions towards harmless topics. If the interactions are unavoidable, try to make them as harmless as you can.
And I had missed Eleanor's earlier question somehow, but it also is related to Laura's question. So Eleanor had said, when do you know someone is useless? It sometimes takes ages for someone to understand something. So when do you give up trying to tame an untrainable person or horse? And then Laura said that she identifies with the untrainable wild horse. I don't know if being wild or untamed is useless. If the horse was created that way, does it mean it's bad?
Well, first off, I'm a little uncomfortable with saying it was created that way. Created by who? So from a Buddhist standpoint, nobody else created us. Rather, we are the product of our own past choices. So, and we're also constantly shaping our own mind. So even if you're currently untamable, well, one, you did that. And two, you can change that. So nobody's ever a lost cause. So if you identify as the untrainable horse, well, look at that and start doing something about it. Make yourself trainable. But if somebody else who you're interacting with is an untrainable horse, well, then you need to ask yourself some serious questions. Number one, are you wasting your time? So even the Buddha could not train everyone he met. So even the Buddha, so a Sammasambuddha is the supreme Dharma teacher by definition. But a Buddha can only teach those who wish to be taught. A Buddha can only train those who wish to be trained. One who does not wish to be trained cannot be trained. So there's two questions. One, are you capable as a Dharma teacher? And two, is the person you're talking to interested in being trained? If the answer to either one of those questions is no, then don't waste your time. Or you might say a little bit in the hopes that it's planting seeds, but don't get wrapped up in it. Don't get emotionally invested in it because you're not likely to see good results anytime soon. So that's a judgment call. So you need to look at the situation and really be honest with yourself about how much effort is worth putting in. But it's good to keep in mind the simile of the 3 sick people that we spoke about a few weeks ago, where the Buddha said, even somebody who will not make progress is still worth sharing the Dhamma with, out of compassion. Okay, anything else?
Lots of thank yous from Gita and Eleanor. Shadow of Label said that she would destroy the whip. Well, I think they would. Rebellious. And Liz also says, thank you for your previous answer. I took the shadow of the whip to mean awareness, lessons coming at us constantly. The first horse recognizes the signs almost instantaneously, while the last, even when feeling extreme pain, doesn't have a clue. And Vishy asks, I don't understand, but if I read it, maybe you will. Isn't all the Vedana Anupasana all about eliminating Rutuja, Chittaja, Aharaja ones and only allow Kammaja Vedanas come up and vanish in equanimity?
Can I see that?
Sure.
Sounds like you're using some polytechnical terms for Abhidhamma. I think you're overcomplicating things, to be perfectly honest. There's not really any point in getting into distinguishing different kinds of Vedana. Just acknowledge that Vedana is Vedana. If you're experiencing painful Vedana and you're reacting to it with aversion, then there's defilement that you need to remove. If you're feeling pleasant Vedana and you're reacting to it with desire, then there's defilement that needs to be removed. If there's neutral Vedana and you're not clearly aware of it, then there's defilement that needs to be removed. So trying to get into distinguishing multiple different forms of Vedana, let's be realistic. You're just playing a mind game. which is not going to get you one step closer to awakening. Don't waste your time. Just ask yourself, is there defilement in the mind right now? If so, remove it. That's it. That's the path to enlightenment right there. You don't need to mess around with all this fancy terminology. Just ask yourself, is there defilement in the mind? If so, get rid of it. That's all.
And then the final comment from Eleanor was to clarify, not that she, not that she, I lost my train of thought. Anyway, to clarify, she said, I was talking about my parents trying to train me. I have suffered from an eating disorder from 20 years and still not recovered. My parents haven't given up on me, but should they?
Well, I think, well, first off, I'm sorry to hear that you've been having this difficulty. And actually, number one, I would recommend that you see an eating disorder counselor. So your parents may be trying to do something that is not within their skill set. There are professionals who have devoted their entire life specifically towards helping people overcome eating disorders. Odds are that's not your parents. And even if that is your parents, it's very difficult to be a good counselor to one's own relatives because one's familial attachments and emotional entanglements tend to get in the way. So I recommend seeing an eating disorder counselor who's not related to you, and maybe seeing multiple eating disorder counselors, as the case may be, if the first one is not helping you. But don't rely on your parents for this sort of thing. They're not necessarily the best people for it. As for yourself, asking whether or not you're an untrainable horse, realistically, the fact that you want to be trained indicates that you're not untrainable. Maybe you're recognizing that the path is longer and more difficult than you had hoped for. But if you sincerely want to change, then you can. But if what you've been doing so far is not working, then you need to be honest with yourself that what you've been doing so far is not working and it's time to try something different. Okay?
And last comment, just to clarify as well, she says, I've spent years in hospitals and with different therapists, and it's actually my parents who have been the most helpful. But most helpful has been Buddhism and meditation. So thank you. All right. And thanks everyone else for joining us today. You can come back tonight at 7:30 p.m. for Monk Chat, where you can ask even more questions about this topic and other topics related to Buddhism or somewhat related to Buddhism. And you can get some responses from a panel of monastics here at Empty Cloud. So we will hopefully see you then, and enjoy the rest of your day and weekend. And we can end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.